So on the other side, we're going to load a couple of glazed pieces, students who have actually glazed their work. So for example, so this student threw this on the pottery wheel. We fired it once, it's bisque fired, and now she has glazed it. So we have different color glazes. The only thing that you usually try to have students not do is this. She glazed the very bottom of this piece. So that means if this sits on the kiln shelf like that, and the kiln is fired, that's going to want to stick to that shelf. So what I could do is a couple of things. I could take a sponge and just wipe that off, which would probably be the fastest and easiest thing to do. Or I can also sometimes take these little extra stilts here, and I just want to make sure it fits. That one fits pretty well. So it means that the pot is kind of sitting off of the shelf and it's sitting on these little points. And what I could do is I could line that up and I could place that down into the kiln. So I'm going to flip it, and actually I'm going to do a different one. I'm going to do this one. It works a little bit better. So I'm going to leave that on there. I'll place that in. Now this student, same thing. She made this little strawberry, different student, and this one there was like no way around it. She coated the entire thing. So the same thing. If I put that on the kiln shelf, it's going to stick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, once again, these little like stilt legs, and what you do is I'll place it down, and I'm just going to take the little strawberry, place it on like that. It's the only way to kind of correct a problem like that. So of course, to run a kiln with just these few pieces in it isn't super efficient. So I'm going to load a few more things, but once again, what I didn't do is, remember, you have to figure out your kiln stilt. So for the next layer of shelving that I put in, like I might decide maybe I'm going to put in some tall pieces right there. So those tall pieces are basically going to be a little bit higher than this shelf. So before I go any further, I'm just going to add in a couple of more of these kiln pieces. And same thing, I have another student that still coated the bottom, so I can't use this one, but I can use this. Most of them pay attention to directions, but as you know, they don't all do it. So this one is a little bit better. That one's cleaner, so I can go with that one. That one's enough that it won't be a problem. This one, I have the same problem. So the student coated the entire bottom piece. So we're going to add star, add it on, ready to go. Now the big difference between glazed pieces and greenware, which is on this side. So these can be stacked because these are greenware and they're going to be fired. So this is a bisque firing for those pieces. This is all the same clay that we're using. It's a low fire clay and it's a low fire glaze. So I can fire them at the same time. So it saves a lot of time for you to use a low fire clay. So let's say that that's ready to go, and I'm going to put in another shelf. So once again, being very careful of my thermostat there, I'm going to bring this in, and I'm going to line that up. And I always want to keep my shelf gap away from the wall, about 1.5 inches, line this up. And then I also want to be away from my thermostat here by at least 3 to 4 inches top and bottom. So I don't want to overcrowd this. The other thing that I should have mentioned is on the glazed pieces, they recommend that when you have something in the kiln that's been glazed, that you might want to keep like 1 inch to 3/4 of an inch separation of your pieces. We've never found that to be a real issue, but we do try to keep everything so we don't want it to touch. So I'm ready now to continue loading the kiln. So all the shelves have been loaded, so we're going to close up the kiln and we're going to actually start the operation. Now, in this particular room, there are a couple of things to notice. This room also has a designated on and off switch for this kiln. We used to have a plug, but we were having problems with that a few years ago, so they ended up opting for this. So right now the kiln is on. Over the summertime, I might turn it off completely, or I can put it back on to operate it. So what we're going to do is, as I was saying before, this kiln is in a separate isolated room. Students can't access it or touch it. If it was in your classroom or in an area that might be open to students, I would recommend keeping the kiln turned off automatically, just so it's off, or unplugged.